An analog quadcopter consists of the ESC board here, where you connect all the motors to the ESC board and it controls the motors. And then on the middle part you have the flight control board, which is the brain of the quadcopter. And then on the top of this is a video transmitter. And this one is the receiver. It talks with your radio. And this is the antenna for the video transmitter. And this is the antenna for this receiver, because this is the TBS crossfire receiver. So you have the camera at the front, ESC, flight control board, VTS, antenna, receiver connected to the flight control board, and then the receiver, antenna, and then you have the camera connected to the VTX, and then you have the motors all connected to the ESC. So this is a basic structure of a quadcopter for analog. This part controls the video received from your camera, and then it transmits then to your goggles. This one is where your radio talks to the flight control board here and move the stick so that the signal goes through the ESC and goes to your motors. So with the boards, they are connected with plugs, with wires, and then you also have the power lead here where you attach your battery. So this is the Yixing V-Swoop. This is the Cadex Vista. As you can see, this one has the Cadex Vista on top, and then you have the ESC and the flight control board all put in one board here. So you have basically just one board here that controls the motors, and then also the flight control board is here, and basically you have the receiver and the VTX in here with the camera attached and the antenna at the back. This one also has a FreeSky receiver built into the board. So this is the Transtep Beetle Home. This one has the DJI A unit in here with the camera attached, and then with two antennas right at the back, and you have a flight control board here, and you have the ESC at the back. So it's actually two boards, and the receiver and the VTX is all in this unit, and also you have the onboard recording with DVR, so that's like a GoPro recording on here. So this quad is the DJI original A unit and camera in there. So the Yixing V-Swoop has the Cadex Vista digital unit, which is from DJI, and also Cadex developed the camera. And let's go back to the analog quad. So you can see that the digital system simplifies the VTX by combining this receiver into this board, and then it's enclosed in a box with heatsink, because inside the box you have the video processing unit for the digital system. So with the DJI A unit, you have the receiver in here, and you also have like a GoPro in there recording function. So by having a receiver built into a box, you eliminate all this messy wiring, and it's all inside here. And also you eliminate this receiver antenna by putting them at the back, and it's connected to the box. So it simplifies the view. If you look at this, if you simplify this build, and if you have the all-in-one board, you basically have just two units like the V-Swoop. But if you have two separate boards, and you have the similar setup with your DJI A unit. So my point of showing you these differences using the quad is because I just want to show you that the quad with DJI A unit or the Cadet Vista, they are not DJI quad because DJI only built the digital FPV system, which is the camera, receiver, and the GoPro inside. And there's a variation to that, which is the Cadet Vista, which only has the receiver and the camera and the digital processing unit in there. So basically, the digital quad that has the DJI FPV system in there is the same as analog quad. It's just that the video processing is different with a different camera and with a receiver built in. Everything else is the same. The flight control board, the ESC, the firmware that controls them, like Betaflight and the BL Heli or D-Shot, whatever, they are basically the same as in analog quad. So when you're setting up your DJI FPV system quad, you are doing the same thing. If you have the same frame, you still need to go through the process of making sure that everything is in place, everything is screwed down, and then you have to set up Betaflight and ensuring that the receiver is working correctly. There's nothing different there except for the digital processing unit and the digital system. So when you're getting into this DJI FPV system quad, you still need to have a bit of a basic knowledge of Betaflight, settings, receiver, transmitter, and so forth, so you know how to set up your quad. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult. So there's a lot of YouTube video out there you can watch. One day, DJI will come up with their own quad where they all will be very simple to set up. I believe they're going to have a quad that has a GPS system in there, like the normal Mavic type of quad, but with the digital FPV system in there so that you can fly like a normal FPV quad and you still have the camera function of the Mavic type of quad. So until that one comes out, all the quad that you have now, they are the same. You have to set them up the same way. So the difference between the analog and the DJI FPV system quad can be shown on this diagram. You can see on the first line, you have the analog camera, the VTX, the receiver that is attached to the flight control board, and the ESC with the motors. And this is the one with the A unit. So the camera, the A unit with the receiver, with the VTX built inside, and the DVR like a GoPro. And the flight control board is here, and then you have the ESC. And this is another variation of the DJI FPV system quad. You have the DJI unit here, and then you have a separate receiver attached to the flight control board and the ESC and the motors. This is if you are using the DJI FPV system quad with your TBS or other receiver. And with the Cadet Vista, I think the camera is the same with the DJI unit. It's just that the enclosure is smaller, it's lighter, it has the VTX and the receiver built in. And in relation to the receiver, sometimes you have the receiver built into the flight control board. If the receiver is built into the flight control board, then you can use either the separate receiver or the receiver in the DJI unit. All you need to do is change the settings of the UART port. But if the receiver is not built into the flight control board, if it's separately connected like this, then you can only use this external receiver because one of the wires here is cut. So I suggest that if you want to use or you want to buy the DJI FPV system quad, I suggest maybe you can buy the PMP one, which is the one that comes with the DJI unit and is ready to fly. You cannot choose the one that says no receiver, because if you choose the one with no receiver, then manufacturer will cut off one of the wires and you have to put on your receiver yourself. So with the analog quad, sometimes you can see there's two boards built together with the receiver built-in. Same with a DJI FPV system quad like the eSIM V-Swoop. It has the one control board with all this built-in, so it becomes a much simpler setup. So you just have one control board and then you connect to your DJI FPV system. Or it can come without the receiver and you have three separate boards. So it's the same with analog quad. So you can see that there's really no difference in the DJI FPV system quad. The only difference is that this DJI A unit and the Cadet Vista, and they have built-in receiver and they have built-in VTS. Other than that, it's all the same. So in terms of physical setup and also Betaflight setup, they're all very much the same. Maybe the best analog goggles after you put on the DJ adapter. But now the question is, do you need it? Well, the answer depends. It's no if you are new or fairly new to FPV flying, because most likely you're not trained in analog and you're not able to fly in analog. What you need to do is you just need to train on your simulator and go straight to digital and just train very hard on the sim and transition to a real digital quad. The answer is yes. If you are already flying analog and you want to upgrade, because there's no point to convert all your analog quad to digital. Just fly analog for certain application or when you feel like flying your analog quad, because it's just too expensive to convert all your analog to digital. So the best thing to do is to convert your DJI FPV goggles to analog using the DG adapter. The answer is also yes. You want to have the best of both worlds. You want digital and analog, because currently the analog is still relevant if you are flying size quad, which is less than 2 inches, because the DJI system cannot be shrunk down to that size yet, and you may take the market a while to research and to shrink it down to the size. Also, it can also help you to practice on an inexpensive quad in your backyard, or you just want to fly around your house or your backyard with a size quad, because practically speaking, you're not able to fly your bigger quads, which is 2 inch and above, every single day that you're free. So you'll be bound to fly smaller quad, especially the size, in your backyard or around the house. Eventually, the analog market will die because the demand will surely die down for the 2 inch and above quad. The reason why it would die down is because in the long run, the digital system will become less expensive. The price will be pushed down, especially if there's a lot of competition from a different manufacturer. You can see that there's a lot of competition right now. Market is currently flooded or being flooded with digital quad from 2 inch to 5 inch. And also because if no one wants to buy the analog anymore, the Chinese market won't be making them anymore. So most of the casual pilots buy quads from Banggood, and you can see a lot of new digital quads coming out from there. But from my experience, when the analog system started, it started with the racing quad, and then the toy market came in, and then they started to produce the small one. And then when someone decided to experiment with making the racing quad smaller, so they started to produce the racing equivalent. So they start producing the carbon fiber microframe. And the experiment started from there, and then micro market started to blow up, and the 5-inch market started to shrink, especially in view of legislation that discouraged people from flying 5-inch quad. So eventually it took about 1 to 2 years for the toy market to disappear, and then for the micro to take over. So I can see from my personal experience, it will take another 1 or 2 years for the analog market to disappear, especially for the micro quad and above. Eventually the racing market will die down also. Digital will take over. In the not too distant future, if the digital market starts growing, then analog market will become a niche market instead of the other way around. Especially if digital can't go to hoop size, digital will definitely be a niche market, and the prices of the analog quad will probably go up because there's less demand, and analog will become more expensive. So maybe just in case, if you want to fly analog or you want to have the best of both worlds, I suggest that you can look around and see if you can find a very cheap analog quad, especially the micro one, and then you can start buying them if you want. That's just maybe if you want to do it. Otherwise, I repeat, if you are new to this digital system, there's really no need for you to convert your DJI FPV goggles to the analog. The answer is yes. If you want to fly analog and also digital at the same times, especially the hoop size, if you want to practice or you want to fly around your house or in your backyard. Or the other one is yes, if you already are flying the analog quad, and it's a no-brainer to convert your DJI FPV goggles to analog goggles with the DJI adapter. So flying a digital FPV system quad and an analog quad is the same. The only difference is that you can see in HD 720p with the digital system, so it's clearer and easier to fly and easier to learn how to fly. As with any flying with a quad, you must start in a simulator. So the FPV Free Rider is a good simulator to start with. By learning how to fly in a simulator, you get a feel of the stick's movement and the quad response, and you can simulate real quad sticks pretty well, except for the weight and the other factors like wind and resistance. So when you learn how to fly in a simulator, you must learn not to crash. Crashing is not an option, because if you crash in real life, it costs a lot of money to replace a quad or to repair a quad. So when you learn in a simulator, you need to learn precision control, precision flying. You need to learn to fly very slow. Once you get used to the control of the quad by flying slow and very precise, then you can then speed up your flight. Before then, you should not fly with speed. And also, I would recommend that you don't learn how to flip and roll until you have learned the basics. So increase speed when you are competent. If you're not competent, fly slow, fly precision flying. Once you are comfortable with your controls in a flight simulator, you can practice with a real quad, and then you learn how to fly with precision. So as a first quad, I would suggest that because you don't know what style of flying you want to fly, I suggest that you buy a cruiser quad which can fly gently. For example, the Yixin V Swoop or the Transtech or Mini Beetle. It's also very crucial that you learn how to fly line of sight, because flying line of sight will let you see the quad. Then you understand how the quad responds in flight when you move your sticks. This is also to help you visualize the quad movement when you fly FPV, and it will help you with situational awareness. Once you are quite comfortable with line of sight, you then need to learn situational awareness. You need to use the real quad and your goggles. My personal experience to learn this is to put on the goggles, turn on the quad, and move the quad around yourself. Put it down on the ground, move it to waist height, turn it around and see where your quad is situated in the FPV goggles, and move it to your head height and do the same thing and move it over your head. Turn the quad around and move your body around, and then you will see your back, your front, and then you roughly measure out the distance between yourself, your quad, and your surrounding. The best thing to do with situational awareness is to look at your surrounding first and estimate how far the surrounding is from you, and then use the method that I've just mentioned. So to estimate your distance from your quad to the distance and from your quad to you. So this is how you learn situational awareness, and this will help you to also quickly get used to the dizziness when you first fly FPV. Then you go back to your sim and repeat the same thing until you get very competent. Just remember, crashing is not an option. When you learn, you must learn not to crash, because in real life, pilots learn to fly without crashing. So with Quadcopter, you also have to learn without crashing, and this will help you to learn responsibility when you fly your quad, because by not crashing, you are making your flying safe, and you are able to avoid and to anticipate when you're going to crash, and you can then correct that mistake. Once you learn your basic, then you can choose the type of flying that you want to get into. The first one that I want to explain is racing. Racing is basically flying with speed in time and doing a lot of flips and rolls and flying through obstacles with precision. The second one is freestyle. Freestyle is basically racing style, but there's no fixed obstacles. You can use your surrounding as your obstacles, like trees, playground, and things like that, and you fly in open space. Third one is casual flying. It's where you cruise around, you explore, sometimes with slow speed and sometimes with high speed. And long range. Long range is basically casual flying, but you fly longer distance. Once you know what style of flying that you want to get into, then you can go into choosing the frame that you like. There's definitely different type of frames for different type of flying, and also different type of efficiency in the motors and props. But you need to learn the basic first before you know what type of quad that you want to fly. The other thing that you also must remember is that it is not necessary to tune your quad like you see in a lot of YouTube videos. You only tune your quad when you are building a quad, adding a lot of weight to your quad, and the quad cannot use the standard parameters that Betaflight has set in to fly your standard quad. And when you start watching a lot of YouTube videos on quad flying, I'm pretty sure that you will first come across freestyle flying, and freestyle pilots usually have GoPro on their quad. The reason for the GoPro is that they want to film their flights, and then they edit the flights and put it on YouTube for everyone to see. And because previously there's no digital quad, the only type of filming can be done is with GoPro. So that's why you have a lot of quads that you can see with freestyle pilots. They have GoPro camera on their quad. It is not necessary as a freestyle pilot to have GoPro on a quad, especially now that you have the digital system, because with the digital system, especially the DJI unit, comes with an onboard recording like a GoPro. It can record up to 1080p Full HD, so that should be enough for us or casual flyer to fly a quadcopter and make some recording. The recording can also be done in the goggles, the DJI FPV goggles. That's 720p HD, and that footage is already very good, especially with the current update of 50 megabits per second. So you don't need a GoPro on all your quad. The only time that you need a GoPro on your quad is that you are doing a particular job and you are a professional. You want to do a very high quality recording. Otherwise, GoPro is very expensive. If you crash the quad, you're going to crash the GoPro and you're going to break it. So the GoPro usually costs about the same as your digital quad. Don't buy a GoPro and put it on your quad, and it will save you a lot of problems. Learn to fly first, and then decide what you want to do in the future in terms of filming. You can decide whether you want to put a GoPro or not. So as mentioned earlier, if you decide that you want to do a bit of filming of your footage, and you want full HD, and you want sound, then you need to choose the DJI unit, because DJI unit can record your quad sound with full HD. The Cadence Vista camera cannot do that. It can only record in your goggles with no sound. The other option currently is the Caddis Vista Nebula. That camera is not very good, so don't buy that one. So the only option now is really the DJI unit and the Vista